House do too.
I'm calling Dr. Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, New Zealanders are rightly proud of the rating that we get from Transparency International. We're usually around number 1 or 2 for lack of corruption and transparency in our country. And that, Mr Speaker, why it is so concerning to read the report into the alleged conflicts of interest at the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority that was released yesterday. We congratulate the State Services Commissioner for commissioning this report, and we welcome its finding. But, Mr Speaker, this is a government that has shown over the last 8 and a bit years that it has been willing to govern by virtue of the facilitation payment. Mr Speaker, we saw it in the Saudi sheep deal, and now disturbingly in this report we see allegations that members who were employed by a public entity were lining their own pockets through their public knowledge. And Mr Speaker, this is not something we are used to seeing in this country, nor is it something that we should tolerate. We were used to shades of black and white in our public service in terms of the standards that we expected of them. The shades of grey that we are seeing creeping in are simply not acceptable, Mr Speaker. What we are seeing here is not something that any government should be willing to tolerate. And, Mr Speaker, it is time that the Minister who is responsible, Jerry Brownlee, took some leadership and took some responsibility. Only today, the day after this report was published, we found that it wasn't the 3 individuals that were originally brought into question and the 2 that have been referred to the Serious Fraud Office for further investigation, but today we learned from Andrew Kibblewhite that there are 3 further individuals who were employees of the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority who are subject of another inquiry. But what is the investigation going to entail? It is going to take a look at the shopping list of names that have been supplied to them. There is no political will from this government to get to the root of what kind of culture was operating within CERA when at least 5 employees saw that it was acceptable to set up private interests that would directly profit off their public sector job. That is not what happens in this country. So what was the culture that was operating within CERA that allowed this to exist? Even more concerning, Mr Speaker, is that there were internal investigations done of these very issues that the Heron report looked at. But did they find that any wrongdoing was done? No, it didn't. No, they didn't, Mr Speaker. This was not an organisation that DPMC was not able to get to the root of what was happening inside this organisation. We need to have a systemic look at what was going on because it is not good enough. The two individuals that have been referred for further investigation by the Serious Fraud Office were so well thought of within the organisation that when the new entity came to replace the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, or Takaro, their employment was transferred. Their employment was transferred because they were seen as doing such a sterling job. These men who have allegedly set up a private company to profit off their public knowledge. This is not good enough, Mr Speaker, and this is not the standard that any politician in this House should tolerate from our public sector. The Minister needs to take some responsibility and ensure that Cantabrians can have faith in the integrity of their rebuild. We look around our city and we see delayed anchor projects. We see the Crown has not done its bit in getting our central city back up and running. And on this side, we see that the very entity that was responsible for getting those projects off the ground, there were individuals in there who potentially were more concerned with making private profit than getting our city back on its feet. Jerry Brownlee, as the Minister, must take responsibility for this.
I call Tim McIndoe.